Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Total Recall podcast. This is me, Will, and I'm excited. I like this one. 0 to 1 is one of my favorite topics in the world, and I'm very excited to introduce Shani Shoham to the podcast. So, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Will.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure indeed. Now, I'm excited to talk to you about this because I see a lot of the content you put out online, and I see a lot of the companies that you've been involved in technology, mentoring, advising, investing over the course of your career. And I think the 0 to 1 piece to go from what's in there to making profit from it is it's treacherous. It's very challenging to get a startup built, first of all, with a viable product that people actually are interested in above and beyond their mom. So great to talk to you about it. And I think where I'd like to start, we were just flowing, just getting into this before I hit the record button, is where do you start? So somebody has an idea, you get pitched all day, every day, I can imagine, by people. Shani, I've got a great idea. What do you think? Where do you start in that process to say, slow down, calm down? Have you thought about this? Where do you go with that?
Yeah, so many people be like when they have an idea, the first thing they do is they start to build wireframes, and if they're technical, they start to build a product, etc. And I think where I like to start is first of all, I think a great place to start is by you experiencing that pain point. I think there's nothing like a person that has experienced the pain point himself and probably has a deeper understanding of the problem than most people. And many times he might have been in the industry, and so he kind of was trying to solve that, maybe even with the different approaches, and sell that to companies. And then I like to start with interviewing people about their pain point, so better understand kind of how they go about the problem today. Do they, like, if someone tells me, yeah, I spend 5 hours every week, trying to gather the data. I literally had, by the way, someone tell me that yesterday on an interview, and so I'm like, okay, there's probably something out there. And I find that I try to stay away from like theoretical questions of how much would you pay for that and those sort of things, because I think it's theoretical questions you have to kind of guesstimate and try to predict the future. I don't know how much I'm going to pay for that, but I can tell you what's the cost for me right now. So I have a person at 120K that's spending probably 20% of his time just gathering these reports manually. So this is why this is, I think, a good place to start. We call those calls, listening to them. Afterwards, by the way, when you create your pitch deck, just like use a lot of these quotes, and so I think that's a good place to start. Maybe jumping ahead a little bit, and you might have a question about that down the line, but I think one of the biggest mistakes that founders do is they initially try to sell. They build something and they try to sell that, and I think my experience, and I've worked with probably a dozen startups, and half of them I was actually full-time, sometimes the founder, the co-founder, etc. So don't try to sell, try to bring value. I think if you bring value and people start using your product, and then at some point you say, okay, enough, we've spent 6 months, you spent 6 months using the product. I appreciate the feedback that you're giving me, but we're a for-profit company, and so if you see enough value, I'd love for us to talk about transitioning you to a paid user. When I founded the company, that's literally what I did. My first couple of customers were using us somewhere between 4 to 6 months, and after 4 to 6 months, I talked to them about paying, and they said, how much? I said 80K. And I thought they're gonna throw me, down the stairs, and they didn't even nudge. They were like immediately, yeah, sure, that's fine. And I was like, I probably underpriced, but
Yeah.
perfectly fine. Don't try to optimize for pricing. I mean, you'll get that down the line. Right now, you're just looking for some validation. You don't want to spend the next 3, 4 years building something that
Mm.
nobody wants to use. And so you want to, as quickly as possible, get to, am I providing value or not?
Yeah, and I think it's a I've had some really interesting conversations the last few days, and I always think about data from a quantity perspective. I worked with a startup a couple of years ago who actually won Europe's Red Herring Award, and they were a data company, based on like psychometric testing. And the founder always said to me that once they get to the number of 50 in terms of their data points, they've got usable data. So I always think, and when I talk to people, I say, right, how many people have you actually run this past? Oh,
Yeah.
two people down the bar, and one person who knows me back home. I'm like, okay, that's not enough data together. And the point I'm making, I spoke to a CEO who actually failed in their startup, and they didn't do enough testing in terms of, what is the problem that you're facing day by day? What's the real problem that you have? And they built a product with very small information to go on, and they continue to build features on top of it. And as such, they followed a red ball over a cliff. They could see the ball. Great, I'm nearly at the ball. That ball went over the cliff, and the company failed as a result. How many times have you seen that where a founder doesn't perhaps go deep enough into the problem? Page one of the pitch deck. This is the problem we are solving. How many times have you come across that?
I don't know if I've seen that often enough because most of the startups that I work with are kind of at the stage of, we have a product, maybe even, we have a couple of customers. But kind of a few thoughts around what you said. So, first of all, I think when you're doing informational interviews, and like the best indication talking about data is someone willing to give you the data. So at the end of the day, you're building something that probably requires some real data sets. And so if someone says, hey, when you have something, I'm happy to, integrate that and play around, and not you suggesting or asking them, yeah, would they be willing to do that, but them actually saying, hey, I again literally had that yesterday. Someone, that same person, towards the end of the call was like, oh, you need data? I can definitely, one of the companies I'm working with, I can definitely give you access to the data. So I think this is like a strong indication.
Mm,
Um, some of the other mistakes that I've seen are, one which I already alluded to is, you're trying to get you're trying to get your first engagement to, pay you as opposed to like, bringing value.
mhm,
I think again, feedback is, super powerful. It's probably much more valuable than anyone would pay you at this stage. I mean, probably the first couple of customers wouldn't pay much, and
mm,
um, and I think them using that on a daily basis, and you having enough analytics, and also on top of that, be able to like sit with them for an hour and kind of ask them some questions. Again, that will bring more value to your product. More value down the line means more
mm.
um, more contracts, more logos, more money.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the second thing that I've seen founders, the second mistakes that I've seen founders make. The third one is mostly around people. It's around bringing the right functions and the right time and the right people. I think that this is probably the most expensive mistake, because if if you bring the wrong person, then it takes about 3 months to until you figure out that it's the wrong person. Then you
Yeah.
start having conversations, and before you know it, it's been like 6 months, and that person hasn't produced much.
Mm,
Many times I've like you're like with 1 month, 1 year of one way, and you can't really afford to hire someone else, and so you're kind of
mm,
stuck with that. And so I think that like hiring the wrong person is probably the most expensive mistake. And bringing the wrong functions. I mean, every function that you bring at the end of the day, it's not just the person. The person needs resources. They need to spend
Hmm.
money, especially when it comes, I come from the go-to-market side. So you're bringing salespeople, they're expensive. You're bringing SDRs, they need tools.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
bringing marketing people, they need to spend money. So bringing those people too early before you have your first couple of customers using you is, I mean, the first couple of customers, you don't need marketing, you don't need salespeople, you just need to talk to enough people, and assuming the problem you solve is big enough,
yeah.
then they would buy into that. And if you're not able to get to there, doesn't matter if you're like a technical person. I mean, again, you're not trying to optimize sales, just trying to get
Mm,
someone to do that. If you're not able to get there, then no salesperson, no marketing person will help you get there.
yeah.
And it's like, again, you're hiring people and you're pretty much setting them for failure because again, if there's no validation for the value, then they're just going to spend money and get a bunch of inputs that will produce no output.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I think if I think about the go-to-market side of things, um, I speak to and have spoken to for many years, founding go-to-market salespeople, founding CEOs, who have to create a go-to-market, and I find a lot of variance in how they go to market. But what's your kind of recipe for success if you're thinking about your methods or people that you've supported, mentored, and brought in as your first hire? What have you
Yeah.
seen the most successful go-to-market strategy? Is it, to give you an example of what's in my mind, do you really go deep into the customer avatar, your customer zebra, what it looks like? Can you paint a picture of it? Do you know how they think, feel, where what's the steps like for you?
So that's a great question. So first of all, I think there's no point talking about like building go-to-market or scaling go-to-market again before you have your first couple of customers and you have some validation to the value. Again, otherwise you're just spending resources and scaling too early. Um, assuming you have those couple of customers, then you have something to work with. And the first thing that I do is I define like who are we selling to? What's our ICP, ideal customer profile? Which companies are we selling to? Which personas in those companies? What those people look like? How many years of experience? What's the day looks like? What's the problem? And I
Mm,
think, and I tell that many entrepreneurs, being able to define the problem in one sentence. I mean, I talk to founders and they kind of know the problem and they spend 5 minutes, explaining to me the problem. And I'm like, explain that in, one sentence and maybe like 6 words, because now you have to go to, on your homepage, you have to, like the hero section, you have to
mm,
write something that probably doesn't go beyond, 4 words on
mm,
the LinkedIn profile, or the title, or the YouTube channel. Again, all of that, or the ad, whatever it is, or even if you're meeting someone, like what's the first sentence that clearly defines the problem? And I find that it's more challenging than you would typically think. So I kind of define again who's the persona, who's the
mm,
company. Most of my experience is B2B, so I find that targeting small mid-market companies is probably easier because if you're a high growth company, you experience a problem, you're not going to spend 6 months doing POCs and talking to a bunch of
mhm,
organizations.
mhm,
You're going to find the first solution that works for you. And you're just going to, you just need something that's good enough and does the job, as opposed to like enterprises where you have to socialize with the solution with so many people and do POCs and then
mm.
get budget approved and stuff like that. So as a startup, the one thing you don't have is time, and so you want to optimize for time and sales cycle. Um, Depending on the persona, I start to think about kind of, is it more inbound motion or outbound? I'm always in favor of like inbound. Inbound is, like people reaching out to you. So they're
Hmm.
probably, they're already at the point ideally that they're looking for a solution or they're at least aware of the problem as opposed to outbound where you many times you're trying to like find a needle in a haystack and
Yeah.
one person that has a problem and thinks that the problem is big enough. Um, we can talk a little bit later on kind of what inbound channels, etc. If your persona is like a senior executive, then they typically don't sign up for trials. They don't, they're probably not going to read your docs. They're, not sure if they're going to read blog posts, etc. And
Yeah.
so that's where you probably need to think a little bit more about outbound. And just one comment about outbound, and I'll take a pause. I find that like the traditional outbound of sending a bunch of emails and asking someone for a meeting, I wake up every morning, I get like 20, 30 emails like that. And typically the title starts with a question or
Mm.
quick one or something like that. And I mostly delete those. I think that instead of asking for a meeting, try to bring value. I find that to work, much more effectively. Whether it's hey, I have a report that I think you might be interested in. Can I send it to you? Or hey, we're doing this event. We're doing
Mm.
a dinner and I saw that you're based not far from the location.
Yeah.
Would you mind if I extend an invite? And again, I think I call that like warm outbound.
Hmm.
You're not trying to cold call someone and ask him for a meeting because like
Mm.
a meeting, I get 20 emails like that every morning. If I would take a meeting with each of these 20 meetings, I wouldn't have no time to
Mm.
actually get stuff done. But if someone's like inviting me to a dinner and I'm gonna meet, like-minded peers,
Yeah.
and yeah, I don't do that often enough. So I'm like, yeah, I should probably go out a little bit and see kind of talk to my peers and figure out what they're doing. Yeah, that's interesting. So
Yeah. I think like for me, the persona, the avatar of one's persona is where some people don't go deep enough. And I've spoken to a lot of salespeople, and actually surprisingly, quite recently, I see a lot of people just draw a basic and generic avatar of their perfect customer. It's a head of IT, or it's a CTO, or it's a head of dev. Okay, great. Tell me more. What do you mean? That's who I sell to. Okay, but what age are they? Where did they go to school? Where did they go to university? Where did they go to college? What are they into? Where do they, create content? Do they share content on Discord, online? You know, create an actual profile of this person like you want to date that person so you know everything about them before you have that engagement. And that, like you say, that's when you can make a real personal approach where you can actually demonstrate that you've done some homework. Without really doing homework, can you really add value to a conversation? And I was quite surprised to see that, really, that people still, I suppose, try and sell like they might have done 18 months ago, or last year, whereas this year's, I think, persona of how people are being sold to and how people are buying has slightly shifted. I think people are buying technology and buying things in a different way now, and I think everybody has to adapt to that and really learn a little bit more about their prospect. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
yeah, totally. I think like if you're targeting, someone in the late 20s that's probably not married, etc., then you target him on certain channels, maybe YouTube Shorts, maybe Instagram, maybe TikTok, so stuff like that. If you're targeting someone in the late 40s with kids, etc., it's like a different,
Mm. Yeah.
literally a different persona, different channels. We care about different things. The language that you use is like
Mm.
different. And
Mm. Yeah.
so yeah, totally agree with
Yeah.
you.
It's a little mistake, isn't it? But like, the head of dev at company A and the head of dev at company B share the same job title, but they are a decade or two apart, and how they absorb technology is worlds apart. That's one thing that I was surprised to find. So, going double down on your avatar, your perfect customer, it's a great start.
Just a comment there. So targeting, a dev manager at a company that does like chips or embedded, for example,
Mm,
it's very different. Again, he's probably in his late 40s, maybe 50s,
yeah,
etc. Than, targeting a dev manager at a startup with or some social whatever,
mm,
like something that's more like bit a blockchain, for
yeah,
example,
yeah,
who's probably more like in his early 30s, maybe late 20s. um so yeah, I think those nuances are very, very important. By the way, they care about different things in their life. So success looks very different for
yeah.
them. The guy in his 50s is already, thinking about retirement, and he just wants to, like, maybe his kids are out and he just wants to travel the world. The guy in his 20, probably cares more about like his fulfilling
Mm,
himself, and he's just in the beginning of his career, and so maybe he's looking to be a senior manager down the line and looking to learn. So
yeah.
very, very different personas.
Yeah, and again, it all comes back to data. Get your MVP right. Make sure that you understand the problem that you're solving, not particularly your product, the problem that you can solve for these people. Get the product fit into that. Know the data points. Talk to as many people, 50 minimum as you possibly can. Then make sure that you're very clear on your customer persona. What exactly do they look like? Even how do they breathe? What sports do they like? As much as you can possibly can, and then the execution model, I suppose, touching into now outbound versus inbound, you can't really do an effective campaign either side of the fence without having that data behind you. There's no way you're going to get inbound traffic if you're not sure on who you're trying to target, because the message is going to go to everybody and everybody will then become white noise. So
Exactly.
yeah, what's your kind of perspective on how then create an effective? Let's start with outbound. What's your what's Shani's top tip for for creating an effective outbound campaign?
So, I think I kind of talked about that a little bit. So two things. One, I find LinkedIn to be super effective. So like the response rate on LinkedIn is like,
Hmm.
5 times even more than than emails. Actually, probably
Okay.
more than 5 times, because I think like on LinkedIn, probably somewhere between 1 out of 5. Yeah, I think I get about like 1 out of 5 response rate, as opposed to like emails. The
Hmm.
second thing, and that's probably one of the reasons why I'm getting 1 out of 5, is I don't ask for a meeting. If you're early stages, and then say I'm building customer advisory board, or I'm just looking for some feedback, or I'm just again, don't try to
Hmm.
sell
Ram
the
it down their
product
throat. Yeah. Mm.
on that first message.
Hmm.
If the company has is a little more established, etc., then I think things like again, doing events and inviting them to an exclusive event, works very well. Last year we did an event for engineering leaders here in the Bay Area. We got about 120 to sign up. This was post-COVID, so everybody was just looking to, kind of get out and,
Mm. Mm.
talk to people, and especially as an engineering leader, and this is again really understanding the persona. I want to know what my peers are doing. I want to know how they manage the teams. I want to know how they structure the teams. I really want to know what they're doing in terms of like AI and Copilot and stuff like that, and not
Hmm.
just what I read on blog posts, but actually talk to people. And so we kind of did an event where we did a bunch of roundtables, and the feedback was just amazing.
Mm.
And then last comment about outbound, and this is again a mistake that I see, especially inexperienced people do, is they try to pitch the solution. Um, I'm, again, my mindset. If I have a problem, I always tell people, think about what someone would Google. So I probably am not Googling the solution, I'm Googling the problem. And so, and
Mm.
that's also what I found to be very effective when people are sending me outbound is if they say something along the lines of, hey, Shani, are you frustrated that you don't have enough time in the day? Yes, I am. If you were to come back, if you were to write, hey, I have a time machine, then okay, what am I going to do with that time machine? So, don't try to pitch the solution. Try to, assert for the problem, if you will. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's much easier to connect mentally. Again, I'm going to spend about
Mm,
15, 20 seconds on this email. If it's a problem that I'm thinking about, and if it's a problem that, again, maybe I experienced that this morning,
hmm.
it's immediately like the first sentence is it's gonna click for me, and I'm likely to respond. I've done that a few times. I'm an early adopter to a lot of tools and solutions. I'm like, it's the industry is evolving so fast. So the way
Yeah.
that you get an edge is by trying a lot of solutions and every now and then adopting one of them. That's kind of what sets me apart from a lot of other CROs and a lot of
Mm,
other, people in my industry is the fact
hmm.
that I'm like, oh yeah, this problem, you can use A, B, and C, and so
Yep.
again, this is where my value comes, and so I think that if you send me an email and say, here's the problem that we solve, or are you experiencing that problem, I'm very likely to respond
Yep.
as opposed to like pitching the solution.
Yeah, I think it's really important, isn't it, to stick to the basics and things like that. What's your story and why should somebody care? What does that person care that you're reaching out to them? What's the problem that you can actually solve and who have you solved it for that's evidence of that fact? What do you know that they don't know? And that's kind of what you have to bring to life, right? Um, and I think again, like data for me, like I love to try and find patterns in things. So where I've done outbound, I'll track all touch points, I'll track all ways of methods of getting in touch with people on a spreadsheet. I'm pretty old school. And then I'll highlight boxes and then I'll look for patterns to say, right, okay, that typically works the most with that demographic. This is the outreach and this is what works. So I can eventually find patterns in the data that you can then double down on. I don't know if you're as meticulous as that, but that tends to work for me anyway.
Yeah.
Um, all of these things here, I mean, typically we've touched on having customers already in play. If you're going into a cold, environment where there's no customers, would you just apply the same tactics? Is it a similar cookie cutter kind of right? Let's go and take this market by storm. This is how we get our first customer.
Your first customer is likely to be, a friend, a colleague, maybe someone you got introduced to. Again, your first customer is not going to be, in my view, it shouldn't be neither outbound. I mean, you can try inbound, but I think that before you have a customer, it's very hard to define the profile. So your first customer might be, again, you've done informational interviews, and one of these interviews, the individual at the end of the meeting said, "When you have something, I'd love to try it out," or something like that. So your first customers are not going to come from neither inbound nor
Yeah.
outbound. They, assuming you've been in the industry and you kind of have a little bit of an intimate knowledge of the palm, then you probably have peers that you can,
Mm.
that are willing to try it out. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I
maybe
yeah.
an
I
advisor, maybe again, it needs to be someone close to you
mm,
that's willing to take a leap of faith and give you some feedback, etc.
yeah.
Even if you get someone that's like, outbound, I'm not sure to what extent they'll actually, I mean, typically first early versions of the product are very, buggy and the user experience isn't great. So I'm not sure if they're gonna actually spend enough effort to like, get onboarded and use a
Hmm.
buggy product and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Nor will they give you the feedback that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's the part of the process that I call identifying your low hanging fruit. I think if you can identify what your low hanging fruit is and who it is, and then who their low hanging fruit is, you can kind of almost see the path to your first customer in doing so, which typically you've already got lined up anyway. Either you've spun this out of your first customer as a tech product or, whatever it might be. So yeah, I understand. And in your kind of, in your experience, once you have those first customers up, the fun part for me comes where you then scale it and you get through, the gauntlet of year one, two, and three. There are stats for every year in business, one, two, and three. The failure rates are still relatively high. Even if you get to year three, I think the stats are still, plus 30%. So
Yeah.
you have to always completely reinvent your sales process every year. How do you do that? How do you use the data and how do you then iterate your sales process and your go to market so that you're not dropping off and chasing that red ball over a cliff?
Yeah, good question. And kind of before I answer, one other comment. The Keep in mind that like once you start charging customers and once you start like building that MRR, ARR, whatever it is, then you're measured on that. So if you get a few customers to pay and then you plateau for a few months and now you have to start explaining that on your next funding round. So again, don't be in a hurry to. I think if you get a bunch of customers to use your product, and once you feel like you can actually start scaling that, you have a conversation with them around paying, and again, you actually build that hockey stick that people are talking about, then that's much better as opposed to like explaining why you had a first set of customers, you convert them to paying customers, and then for 6 months you weren't able to get another customer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about that. In terms of like building the playbook, so I've done that a few times. So typically, yeah, so I build those playbooks a few times. So what I like to do is I always like to manage a few opportunities myself, and that way I can always get a feel for objections, and try run different experiments and see what works and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
I find that then also the kind of the feedback and the tips that I give the other sales reps are, they're much more tangible. They're based on experience as opposed to like, reading from some book or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I'm an early adopter, so I always try like, I go on, I'm still the kind of person that goes on webinars and stuff like that. And I hear ideas from other people and then I try them out. And so, and I'll give an example in a second, but, so typically, first playbook, I record all my calls. I literally create a Google Doc. I'll start writing down like, here's what you present in the first 5 minutes. Here are the questions that you ask. Um, you know, uh, you jump on a demo. Here's like what you present. Here are the questions that you'll typically get asked. Here are the answers, etc. And again, this is a living document, so we're constantly changing and evolving that document. As the product
Mm-hmm.
changes, we learn new things, etc. Um, by the way, one example of like something that I tried, and again, I tried by accident, but it actually, it worked. You and I were on a conference a few months ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I started taking pictures of like people that I spoke to on the booth, with their badge, and I did that accidentally just so I wouldn't like forget to follow up with them, etc. And then and again, those were the ones that I didn't schedule on site, and so those ones that I didn't, I afterwards when I followed up with them, I actually sent them the picture that I took,
Yeah, nice.
and And the response rate was much, much better. I mean, think about it. They get a bunch
Mm.
of follow-ups from a bunch of companies, and suddenly they get someone that, and half of these companies, they probably don't remember whether they talked to or not, and they
Yeah.
think it's like some automated email. And suddenly they get an email with their picture. So one, they know it's not automated. Two, they, you know,
Hmm.
it I differentiate myself versus all the, you know, all the noise and clutter. So it worked very well.
You,
So let's just say
that's
this.
that's the difference, though, isn't it? To try something different. I mean, at that very conference where I saw you, I was using ChatGPT, the app, and I was putting the name of the company in there and saying how does this company compare to their nearest competitor? And I was walking up to the CEO and saying, I just put your company into ChatGPT, and they're like, no way, what did it say? And you build that immediate, like,
Yeah.
that common ground. So trying different things, I think that's the fun part of sales for me. Like, so many people get like anxiety around selling and get the fear of rejection paralyzing them in how they're actually approaching, these conversations. When in fact you can make it fun. If you've got a day of cold calling ahead of you, try something different on every single call. Like years ago, we used to pick somebody that you can cold call into as practice, somebody
Mhm.
completely obscure. And I cold called, I think it was the head of the NBA in the USA just to practice my pitch. And it's just one of those, make it as fun as you possibly can and do something different to stand out. Exactly that. And I think it
Yeah.
it leads me into my next question nicely, actually. A lot of founders, especially in dev first organizations, they are not salespeople. And the amount of conversations that I've had, that I've seen online around CEOs who are hands-off sales, and a lot of people are saying you have to sell. You're a founder, you've got to sell, you've got to sell, you've got to sell. There seems to be that battle there going internally in their minds. I'm a techie, I don't sell. What's your take?
Um, so I don't think about it as like selling. First of all, taking a step back, as a CEO of a company, you're gonna spend 90% of your time selling,
Hmm.
whether you like it or you don't. And if you don't like it, then maybe you shouldn't start a company, or maybe you should. I mean, you should rethink that, because you're going to sell to candidates that you're trying to bring on board. You're going to sell to investors. You're going to sell to prospects. So, you're going to go to conferences at, the first couple of years, because you're not going to have, a 10 people events team in the first couple of years. So
Hmm.
whether you like it or not, you're going to be selling. Like I said, I think at least the first couple of customers, don't try selling. I mean, it's not, you're not a salesperson. I think, you should actually embrace that as opposed to trying to fight that. Um, you're a peer. So again, you probably experience the problem that you're trying to solve. You can talk about it, probably, and I'm pretty technical, but
Hmm.
you can probably talk about that with a level of credibility that's higher than a salesperson or even a technical salesperson like myself. And so um, and so I think, again, bring that credibility, and I think it will go a long way. Don't try to optimize for pricing, and maybe you're not going to do a great job at qualifying them, or a great job at
Hmm.
optimizing pricing, optimizing the sales process, etc.
Yeah.
That's perfectly fine. You're just trying to get them to use your product. um, you can always, find a good advisor that like, has been for those 30 years, and maybe will give you a little bit of guidance around, how do I convert those never-ending POCs and stuff like that?
Hmm.
When's the right time to pull the trigger?
Yeah.
I've, I've been involved in a few companies at these stages as an advisor, and kind of spend some time with the founder, thinking, through the sales process of these opportunities. Um, yeah, but again, don't try to fight it, and realize that whether you like it or not, you're always going to be selling.
Yep.
And I think, the good founders, many times they actually evolved into that role. So again, they're probably not going to be the greatest sales managers. They're not going to be able to run forecast meetings and mentor sales reps, etc.
Hmm.
But they're at least like, they're learning and they're asking the right questions, and they embrace the fact that at the end of the day, a customer or a company, a startup,
Mm.
lives or dies by its customers, not by product and features and stuff like that. And I think that's another mistake that I've seen a lot of startups do, is they're so sure about, hey, I'm just going to build this feature and then I'm going to build that feature and then the
Yeah.
next feature. It's a never-ending story, and as opposed to like, I'm going to spend some time with my customers, and if two customers said that this is the use case or this is what they would love to see in the product, then maybe I should embrace that. So many times they kind of they don't spend enough time with their customers, especially if the customers are abroad, and they actually build the product based on like in a vacuum, as opposed to like building the product based on true customer feedback.
Yeah, and it's exactly the conversation I've had today. In fact, when I use the analogy of chasing the ball over the cliff, so focused on the features that everything else was blocked out completely, and the company failed, and they didn't realize that it was failing because there was once they get this feature out, everything will be okay. This feature release will solve the problem, and it run out of runway. Very sad
By the way,
position
a
to be in.
true example, personal example, my first startup, it was in an industry that I knew super well. I was the president of another company prior to
Mm,
that, got that company from the first five customers to over 150. That company got acquired for like $200 million. So I felt like I knew the industry very well. I knew exactly what's needed. And luckily, we spent less than 3 months like building an MVP, and we started, and then I reached out to a lot of folks that I've worked with, and
mm,
I started showing that to them, and again they had objections that I didn't even think about, and again luckily we didn't. We only spent 3 months building something. We could actually repurpose a lot of that into something else that they wanted, and
mm,
spend another, I don't think it was even 2 months, rebuilding the product, and then went back to the same people that gave me the feedback, and this time they liked it more, and they
hmm.
could actually use that, and so that's how I got my first set of customers as well. So again, even if I'm like super sure that this is like the product that people need,
Mm.
and listen, it's very hard to know, and there's nothing like getting feedback as quickly as possible, and again listening to your customers feedback, as opposed to like being sure that you know
Yeah.
exactly what you need to build.
Again, data, ask hard questions as often as you possibly can. I think
Yeah.
that's one thing that so many salespeople that I've seen are afraid to ask hard questions because they don't like hard answers. But I think, a lot of there's one quote that sticks in my mind, and I can't remember who it was. I think it was either Zig Ziglar or Jeb Blunt, who have both written very good sales books. And it was demonstrate the value and the price will take care of itself. And I think, a lot of the startup founders should really be able to demonstrate the value. And, with enough hard conversations with customers or would be customers, they should really be able to bring that value to life, which should take some of the anxiety away, to think, I'm not actually selling here, I'm just demonstrating the value of my product, and people should respond if I've got my customer persona right.
Yeah, think about I've been using Netflix for I don't know how many years. I remember like the first time I signed up to kind of the online version, they had a rental business that they would like send you CDs or whatever it was.
Mm,
But when they transitioned online, I think it was like 199 or 599 or something like that. today I'm paying Netflix like over $20. And
Yeah.
so it's initially they weren't trying to optimize for pricing. They were just saying, would someone pay for that? And again, I
Yeah.
can think of many, many other examples like that. One other thing that's you asked me earlier about kind of mistakes and I want to talk about one other mistake that I've seen companies do more often than not, especially at the scale stage, is they sold to the first couple of customers, and now they're trying to kind of scale, and maybe they even hired like they're like looking to start building that sales team,
Hmm.
and so one, always hire two people, especially as your first reps, because kind of you have to figure it out, and two people are more likely to figure it out than one person. You're trying to build the
Mm.
playbook, etc.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it's a tough world to be the first. Whether it's an SDR, whether it's a salesperson at a startup, and you really don't have people to like consult with and brainstorm with, etc. So always hire two. Also, if one fails, then if you only have one data point, you don't know whether they fail because of them, because of the product, because of
Mm.
they
Yeah.
didn't get enough support, etc. If you have two, then you have more data points.
Hmm.
But the mistake that many make is like hiring, someone that comes from a larger company and has never done startups. And I can tell you,
Yeah.
especially at like a VP role or head of sales, I can't, say how many times I've seen that startup hires, someone who was a regional VP at Salesforce
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something like that. And again, those people, they're first of all, they don't want to get their hands dirty. They want to manage and build a team. And I think at an early stage startup, it's really about rolling up your sleeves and getting things done.
Mm.
They're used to having like a product marketing team that will give the messaging and campaigns and build assets for them, and maybe an SEO or a product person that's going to jump and do
Mm.
demos and you need to do infosec and security audits. There's a security team that's gonna,
Yeah.
help you go for those audits. And none of that actually exists at a startup. At a startup, especially at the early stages, as the salesperson, you're doing so many things that are non-sales. You're creating documents, you're creating presentations,
Hmm.
you're demoing the product, you're answering questions and stuff like that. And so
Yeah.
I think that and more than anything, I mean, startups are it's like one big chaos, and you really gotta feel comfortable with that, type of atmosphere, and
Yeah.
it's a fast-moving environment. Nobody's gonna give you a playbook. Nobody's gonna give you 1 month of
Hmm.
onboarding and stuff like that. By the end of your first week, you're already jumping on the call and and doing demos and stuff. So that's probably kind of at the scale stage. That's probably the most common mistake that I've seen.
Yeah, and there's always a tell for me because obviously, I'm in the business of speaking to those people day in, day out. I speak to the CEOs and I speak to the would-be first sales hires. And typically some of the tells that I look for when I'm interviewing these people are where they are asking what the support is around them. What do I get SDR support? Do I get leads for marketing? Do I get this? Who's doing that for me? And I'm like, look, this isn't quite the right role for you. You need probably, 1 to 2 plus, not 0 to 1. And the people that I've spoken to who have gone to succeed are typically asking me, well, not even asking me questions. They're telling me what they're going to come in and do and how they're going to set the world on fire. The last person that I hired, he literally said to me, if I start in that company in the next 2 weeks, because I know this buying cycles of the customers that they're going after, I'll make $1 million in revenue in the next year. And I'm like, that's the person to send in there. Not somebody who's, do I get SDR support? Where's my lead coming from? That person typically might not survive. They might not.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody who's chomping at the bit, who's saying, send me in there, send me in, I'm ready to go. That's kind of, I've got like some tells that I look for. Anyway, I digress. Um, so I think the nuances of how we kind of get this to market for me is all underpinned by the more emotive side of it. And I'm very interested in psychology of people and how they interact. I read a great book by the guy who was in the FBI, Joe Navarro, his name is. He's written some great psychology books, which is applicable to sales. Um, what do you find? Is there like a commonality between your successful hires that you've made, successful CEOs, in what I call their why? Is it their why? Is their motivations like, typically around something specific? What do you look for there?
For when I talk to CEOs or when I talk to go-to-market folks?
I guess if you want to divide the two, feel free. But ultimately, is there a common thing that you see in these people, CEO or go-to-market salespeople, that you think, right, okay, that's the marker for success?
Yeah, good question. So CEOs, I would say, I'm looking for a couple of things. Um, I'm looking for people that they're passionate about kind of the problem that they solve. Because again, they're going to spend, and I would say this is probably more me as an investor, they would spend the next 10, 15 years kind of building that company, and they're going to experience tons of roller coasters, and they're going to have good days and bad days.
Mm,
And again, I think at the end of the day, what keeps you running um, is whether you're that passionate about the problem and about the industry, and you
mm,
actually see yourself again doing that for the next 20 years. Um, so that's one. Like I said, I think great CEOs hire great people. So I I typically I talk to the people that they hired, and I want to make sure that I can learn from them as much as I can teach, and I can they're like an exceptional bunch. Because again, there's a saying that A people hire A people and B people
yep.
hire C people, and I've seen that at quite a few startups. Um, so those are kind of what comes to mind. When it comes to hiring, go-to-market people, especially sales reps, as I mentioned, I'm looking for that, startup experience. So someone who's been through a startup or an early stage, or, again, knows what he's getting into. I'm looking for someone who's curious and asks questions. I think sales has changed over the last, I don't know, 15 years. 15 years ago, you would try to, excuse my language, but shove a solution that someone probably doesn't need.
Mm,
And I think nowadays, when there's so much information out there and there's so much competition, it's much more about, kind of understanding the prospect's problem and trying to figure out if you have the right solution for that. And if
yeah.
you do, then convincing him about that. Um, and so I think that the best way to kind of do that is to ask a lot of questions and genuinely be interested in in kind of the prospect and what's the problem. And I even find that about myself. I mean, if I get on calls 5 times a day, then if I'm not interested in kind of what problem they have and maybe getting some insights and using that insight on other calls, then I'm probably going to be bored
Mm,
by the second call, and I'm gonna be like bummed that I actually have to start my day and
yeah.
talk to another prospect. And so I typically look for people that have they won't just the right place at the right time, because like that's for most startups, that's not the case.
Mm.
If if you've been with Slack at the early days, or you join OpenAI early on, I mean, the only thing you needed to do is just be there,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's it. I mean, they were going super fast. There wasn't much competition, etc.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
again, most startups, that's not the case. Most startups are not OpenAI, and so you're like facing a lot of objections, and you don't have the social proof, and you're trying to, best case, you have just a handful of customers, and you're trying
Yeah.
to convince the next one, and the product isn't perfect, and it's missing features, and you have to like commit to stuff in order to get the contract
Hmm.
underway. And so I typically, the way that I ask for that is I typically start with, okay, who are your customers, or who did you sell to at, company such and such?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we sold to Bank of America and American Express and JP Morgan Chase and Walmart and Target and Disney, and so I pick one of those logos. Okay, you mentioned Disney. I mean, talk to me a little bit more about kind of that.
That
Who did you
process.
sell to? What was the problem that they were looking to solve?
Yeah.
How long did it take? What was the deal value, etc.? And typically, when you start to ask those questions, it's very hard for someone. Some, like, typically they don't expect that. So
Yeah.
uh, if they've really done that, then they'll be able to tell a story and
Yeah.
actually, tell you what was the real problem that they were looking to solve.
And the
And,
pain is that they
and they would
felt.
remember, like, by heart, the name of the
Mm.
person, his title, and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And it's very hard to fake it. And
Yeah.
and then also for those questions, you actually learn how they operate. Was it yeah, I don't really remember the objections because my SE was actually handling that, and I don't really remember how I came about them because my SDR was prospecting to them,
Yeah.
or actually an existing customer, and I just I did the renewal, and maybe I got a little bit of upsell. So
Mm.
I think that really tells a lot. It's very hard for someone to like really fake the
Emotion.
answers to questions that are so
Mm.
detailed.
Yeah. It's funny really because like in my first startup, I remember my first deal, and my first startup was funded, and I had a very understanding and a very patient investor. Um, and it took me 3 or 4 months of iteration of exactly what market I was going after, which is why now I've fine-tuned my customer, my avatar, um, until I finally realized what market I was going after. And it so happened to be cybersecurity. And my avatar was this CEO of funded cyber startups in Israel. So imagine cold calling into these people. This was 6, 7 years ago. And it wasn't that common really for an English recruiter to be phoning in cold calling. And the first person that gave me a chance was, I remember him and I still talk to him this day. And he was the CEO of a company that had spun out of Elbit Systems. And he's like, how did you get this number? It's like, who is this? And I was like, just hear me out. Just listen to my story and then you can tell me to go or not. And it's like, you got like 20 seconds. And he became a great customer. And
Nice.
the pain that I went through to get to that point for that first deal was months of no, no, who are you? How did you get this? No, no. And it hurt every day, it hurt, reinventing myself every day. You can't fake that, like you say. And when I'm talking to people now who are salespeople and I want to know, do they know what that pain is? Because there's no point making a hire as a sales as a company with limited runway that you're not sure about, that hasn't felt the pain, that doesn't know what it feels like to go through that 3, 4, 5 months of, get off the phone, stop it, never call me again, unsubscribe, because they'll just leave. And then like you said earlier in the call, you've wasted 3 or 4 months. So it's really important, to any of the CEOs that might be listening or CROs, to really hone in on that pain. Have you felt the pain of being in a startup? For me, it's the most important thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
Mm,
very hard to fake it. Like I mean, you literally just told the story that, again, it's very hard to come up with this story on the fly if I'm going to ask
yeah.
you how you got into that customer. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Look, we could talk all day for about this. It's my
Yeah.
favorite topic. So look, I'm gonna let you go and enjoy the rest of your day. I know you're stuck in the garage, so hence why I think we've got the cows in the background as a fake background. But Shani, it's a real pleasure to talk to you again. And I know I still owe you a bottle of something in the post, and it's very difficult for me to send booze to the USA, but I'm gonna get it.
That's okay.
I'm gonna
I
get it to you.
I'll have to come to the UK then, so gives me an
Please,
excuse.
yeah, please do. I've got somebody coming over from Israel actually tomorrow, and I'm going to take him to see the Peaky Blinders gin facility. So that'll be exciting. Yeah,
Nice.
but look, go and enjoy your weekend. Thanks again, and I hope everybody listen benefits. And if people improve their processes by 1%, we've added some value to the world, right?
Yeah. I feel like you had really great questions and yeah, really appreciate that. It was very interesting and again, we're just like we're talking, so it's
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm sure that some people would find it beneficial. So thanks for having me and have a great weekend.
Wicked. Cheers, Shani. Take
Yeah.
care. Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye.